This is FSN.
Thanks, Ollie Barrett. Thank you very much. It's Wednesday, October 3rd, 2018. It's turned out to be a nice day. It's been a nice day here in Manchester. Welcome to the programme. Between now and 7 o'clock, you can tweet me. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. That is my Twitter handle. At Richie Allen Show on Twitter. Good to be with you.
Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show. It's the Richie Allen Show. Broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Yes, welcome. Deborah Tavares joins the programme in around about 25 minutes or thereabouts. Looking forward to that. She's going to be with me for the rest of the show, and we'll be talking about the campaigns that she's running through her website, Stop the Crime. Many of you will have followed Deborah's work over the years. It's the first time that she's appeared on this particular programme. I'm looking forward to meeting her, and we'll do that, as I said, in about 25 minutes time. Let me get rid of the music. I'm going to lose my voice at some stage over the next day or two. It won't put paid to the programme, but I'm beginning to lose it. I've had a bit of a cold overnight, and the nose has been running and the throat's a bit sore. It happens to me about twice a year and the voice just disappears, but I'll manage. We'll be all right. I'll struggle through, but it is the bane of public speakers and TV and radio presenters the world over, is strep throat, or basically a throat infection, which is one of those things. But we'll get through it anyway. We'll get through it, is what we'll do. Do you know what? You have to laugh. As I speak with you, I've always got several news bureaus open. AP, Associated Press, BBC, and maybe Sky sometimes. And some of the broadsheet newspaper websites are open on various computers that surround me. I have to laugh at the silliness of public life. The coroner who's looking into what happened during last year's Westminster attack has ruled that the 5 people who died were unlawfully killed. Holy cow, Batman! What a waste of public money! How many millions of pounds are paid to coroners and to the barristers who support them? How many millions? And they tell you that they were unlawfully killed. I've got a mate called Billy Murphy. For a 6-pack of Stella and a couple of Playboys, he would have found the same conclusion, that they were unlawfully killed. Wow. Is that what they had the inquiry for? This is the Khalid Masood attack on Westminster Bridge last year, which no doubt many of our listeners will tell you never happened at all. I'm not getting into that today anyway. But there you are. Unlawfully killed. Millions spent of public money. My mate Billy, couple of Playboy mags and a 6-pack of Stella, he'd have done it in a heartbeat. 6.5 minutes past the hour. Let's move on. Theresa May danced her way across the stage in Birmingham today at the Tory party conference to give her annual address. More on that shortly. I'm not going to bore you with too much of that. But before that, dear listener, came across this today in a newspaper in Minnesota. Minnesota now offers X for gender option on driver's licenses. So a third gender option is now available for Minnesotans when they go to apply for their license. In addition to M and F, which presumably stand for male and female, there will be now an Xbox. Not an Xbox, but a box with X that you can check. And if you are an applicant who doesn't want to identify as male or female, sure, why not? You can tick X. Right. This started on Monday, the first day the state also began accepting applications for Real ID. What's Real ID? Well, I can't wait to speak to my friend Pippa King tomorrow. Real ID is the fortified driver's licenses required by the federal government in the aftermath of 9/11. The creepy, crawly, the tentacles of totalitarianism. Fortified driver's licenses. I saw the passport that belonged to Mohammed Atta, that mysteriously appeared pristine in the rubble in New York, was fortified, considering it wasn't even singed, allegedly. Anyway, back to the X option. The X option, if you don't identify as male or female, you can tick X. Now, support isn't unanimous, writes this newspaper in Minnesota. Senator Scott Newman, who's a Republican, released a statement questioning the change, and he said the change was made unilaterally by Democrats in the Dayton administration without legislative approval, and I have questions about its legality, he said. And he goes on to ask, will the change hamper law enforcement's ability to properly identify suspects or hinder the investigative process in any way? The public, says the Republican senator, well, the public deserves answers to those questions. Of course, the article, the Minnesota newspaper article, is full of quotes, well, from Generation Snowflake. They're thrilled. They're thrilled. I can live. Now I get to take X. The world has to accept that I'm not male, nor am I female. So there's loads and loads of quotes. M.J. Zappa, who grew up male, may have been the first person to come away with the new designation on the Minnesota driver's license. Zappa, 26, of Medicine Lake. He should be fucking drowned in Medicine Lake. He might come to his senses. He arrived at the service centre on Minnesota Street on Monday at 7:30 to be the first, and he was welcomed in right away. And he gives a lovely account of how he did it. He just walked in, handed them my old licence and the letter from my doctor, and they asked me all the questions on the paper verbally. Then I walked out with the new temporary licence and an assurance I would get the card in the mail soon. And they want this stuff on passports as well. And there's a person called Christy Elan Kane here in the UK who threw a hissy fit after a monologue that I did about 4 or 5 months ago. Christy is a woman who says that she's neither female nor male. And they want all the passports changed. You know what I say? Change the passports if they want, but I urge every airport security guard all over the world, from Timbuktu to the Seychelles to Belfast to Singapore, when somebody comes through passport control with an X, punish the fucker. Keep him there for 2 fucking days. That's what you do. That's how you beat this madness. Civil disobedience. Where are you coming from there? Let me have a look at your passport there. Oh, I see you've ticked the X. Well, we'll have to have a conversation. And keep them there forever. It's insane, this. It's beyond crazy. No opposition to it. 11 minutes past 5. Now, Sarah Khan got a mention on this programme yesterday. She's a rep at Manchester University Students' Union. Well, she's the Liberation and Access Officer. Sarah, several months ago, defaced a poem at Manchester University, a mural that depicted Rudyard Kipling's If, because she was triggered by Rudyard Kipling and his history and his support for the empire and imperialism and all that. So she defaced it. She's a snowflake. She has introduced a new rule. It is her idea. It's received unanimous backing. And from now on, Manchester Students' Union events will be devoid of the sound of clapping. No clapping anymore because of people with anxiety. I asked my old friend, Gene Wilder. I said, Gene, I said, what do you make of that? No clapping, lest people who have anxiety be triggered.
You stupid, ignorant son of a bitch, dumb bastard! Jesus Christ, I've met some dumb bastards in my time, but you outdo them all.
Yes, Amy?
What kind of fuckery is this?
Do. Anyway, she went on Sky News today to be grilled by Kay Burley. Kay Burley first asked Sarah Khan, what in the name of Jesus is this really all about, Sarah Khan?
So, the reason why we are encouraging students to adopt BSL applause instead of traditional applause is because students who have issues such as sensory overload, autism, anxiety disorders, a lot of the time sudden noises and particularly loud noises can be very can be too much for them, and they feel the need to either withdraw themselves from the situation or not partake in the event at all. And because in the context of student democracy specifically, we really want as many students as possible to be taking part and expressing their opinions. We feel that this measure is going to make our events more accessible.
Yeah, and were there many people asking to stop the applause? Is that why you decided to do this? Was there legions of people coming forward to say we're triggered by the sound of applause?
The National Union of Students has been encouraging delegates to use BSL clapping since 2015 because they experienced a lot of delegates telling them that they had, they were unable to take part in motions debate and things like that. And we've had similar concerns expressed by students here. So that's where the idea came from.
Yeah, not buying it. I'm not buying it at all. Sarah Khan. Let's call bullshit on that. Lots of delegates coming forward to say that anxiety issues prevented them from going to events because of the applause. Lot of delegates, my arse, bullshitter. Do people clap anyway? And when they do, how do you deal with it?
Yeah, sometimes they do. And the thing is that sometimes they do it just because, they've forgotten, and we're completely fine with just gently reminding them why that we're encouraging them to use BSL clapping. I think a lot of people think that we're like really policing students on this, but it's really just a matter of us wanting to let them know how they can make environments more inclusive.
And what about people who think it's a bit silly?
Good question, Kay. What about those who think it's a bit silly? Listen, I think it's a load of bollocks. I'm going to clap anyway. If somebody says something, or if there's a song sung and it concludes and I feel it deserves a bit of applause, I'm going to applaud anyway. What about those applaud anyway? What about those people? Come on.
I think it's a shame that people think it's silly. I think that a lot of the narrative around it, people calling it jazz hands and not always referring to it as BSL clapping, because at the end of the day, it is.
But it is jazz hands, though, isn't it? If you type jazz hands into Google, that is what you find.
It's a more informal description of something that is official part of British Sign Language, though. I think that sometimes when people don't mention that, it feels like it's trivializing it a little bit. But at the end of the day, for people who have this issue on a daily basis, it's a completely valid form.
Ooh.
Oh, I think we've lost Sarah. Okay.
Yeah, we've lost Sarah. Thank heavens for that. You wish sometimes Kay would grow a pair of ovaries and annihilate goons like Sarah Khan. It's an open goal, As a presenter, you wait all week for a moron like that to come on your show. I'd have triggered her into total meltdown. Not bullied her, just exposed her psychopathy, and then sent her on her merry way with a kick in the arse and a lollipop. I mean, have you ever heard of earplugs, love, People go to horror films and you see them in the cinema, they've got these earplugs because of the loud noises, because the bastard projectionists in the cinema are very clever. They turn the sound up really loud because the films aren't scary anyway. They're shite. So they turn the sound up. So you get people going in, they've got earplugs. They can still hear what's going on, but when a big noise happens, they're not as moved or affected by it. You can still hear what's happening, but just not as loud. Vladimir Putin is in the news this afternoon, dear listener. The Russian president has called Sergei Skripal a traitor and a scumbag. Don't mince your words there, Vlad. He gave a speech today, or earlier today, and in it he complained that the media were treating Skripal as some kind of human rights defender, insisting that Skripal had in fact betrayed his country. If you don't know the story by now, you've been living on Mars. Skripal and Yulia, his daughter, allegedly survived a poisoning attack in Salisbury. The UK still maintains the attack was carried out by agents of Russian military intelligence. No evidence to support it, but they keep saying it anyway. I see that some of our colleagues are pushing the theory that Mr. Skripal was almost some kind of human rights activist, Putin said today. He went on, did Putin, to say that Skripal was a traitor to the motherland. What else did he say? Oh yeah, he said he's simply a scumbag. That's all. Good stuff. 18 minutes past the hour. The May bot, Theresa May, the UK Prime Minister, was at Tory conference in Birmingham today, and she danced onto the stage to the tune of Dancing Queen by ABBA, sending up her own bad press, negative press she received when she was seen dancing with various people on her recent trips to Africa. All right, she isn't taking herself as seriously. That's the impression they want to give anyway. Nothing is so hideous, dear listener, as a politician dancing. Well, maybe me dancing. Let's be honest about it. I've never been the best cutter of rugs. I'll just leave that one there. So, May, I've got a couple of snippets for you. Theresa May, she spent a lot of time bashing Corbyn over anti-Semitism. Quite a lot of time. Won't get into that because we flogged that horse to death. Here's a couple of snippets of May today.
We will not betray the result of the referendum, and we will never break up our country. I have treated the European Union with nothing but respect. The United Kingdom expects the same.
Did the Conservative Party not get the memo? No, you can't clap anymore in case there's a fucking snowflake in the conference hall who might be melting down. Obviously they didn't get the memo.
Now, in a negotiation, if you can't accept what the other side proposes, you present an alternative. And this is what we have done. Our proposal is for a free trade deal that provides for frictionless trade in goods. A second referendum would be a politician's vote. Politicians telling people they got it wrong the first time and should try again. Think for a moment what it would do to faith in our democracy if, having asked the people of this country to take this decision, politicians tried to overturn it. Those of us who do respect the result, whichever side of the question we stood on 2 years ago, need to come together now. If we don't, if we all go off in different directions in pursuit of our own visions of the perfect Brexit, we risk ending up with no Brexit at all.
May is betraying the referendum result herself by offering checkers, which keeps us in. I'm not going to flog that dead horse either, because I've said a lot about it in recent months. It keeps the UK in the European Union, the deal that she wants to put forward. That is in itself a betrayal. Right, leave that there. Then, dear listener, the Whopper to end all Whoppers. A treble Whopper with bacon, cheese, gherkins, onion, red cabbage, with 5 boxes of fries. This Whopper, she says next, just as the Blue Fairy was getting back on her feet and reaching for her wand, May murdered her with this Whopper. Austerity is finished, said May. Yeah, of course it is.
Now, third, after a decade of austerity, people need to know that their hard work has paid off. Because of that hard work and the decisions taken by the Chancellor, our national debt is starting to fall for the first time in a generation. This is a historic achievement. But getting to this turning point wasn't easy.
The national debt, eh? Oh yeah, that's where you issue government bonds and treasury notes to businesses, to pension funds, to banks, like the Bank of England, who in return give you the capital to go and spend. And then when everything goes tits up, as it does, they come and collect all the real wealth in the country. That's what you mean by national debt, Theresa. A debt that need never exist. The UK paying the Bank of the UK in order to do its business and to roll out its programme of government. This is the insanity that most people in the world don't understand, and that the economist Steve Keen admitted on this programme only 3 months ago. Why would you need to borrow from anybody in order to do the things you need to do? Like fund the health service, fund the police, fund education and all the rest of it. Why would you need to borrow to do that? This is the greatest of all the conspiracies. Well, it's not a conspiracy. Well, it's a conspiracy, of course, because as that debt rolls on and on and on and on and on and goes up and 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 up, those that the money is owed to, the creditors, they say, well, you know, you've got to force austerity on the people, give us the money back, and in the meantime give us all the assets, asset strip the country and give us everything. That's what it is. Austerity is over, says this liar.
Public sector workers have had their wages frozen. Local services have had to do more with less.
And there was no need for any of that. This is the thing. And you will not find an economist with the balls. You will not find a banker with the balls to come on a programme like this and debate me. It's the greatest fraud, charade in history, that you need to fund public services by borrowing through the issuing of government bonds and treasury notes. It's fucking rubbish. And she's saying it and they're all clapping it, and there isn't a journalist in the country who's got the balls to say to her, who are you borrowing from? Who are you borrowing from?
And families felt the squeeze.
Families felt the squeeze, there's no doubt about that. Families are on the streets in this city and in other cities because of what's been going on.
Fixing our finances was necessary. There must be no return to the uncontrolled borrowing of the past. No undoing of all the progress made of the last 8 years.
Yeah, there should be no borrowing, full stop. Again, borrowing from who? And where did the creditor get all that money? They imagine it into existence. So when you issue a government bond to the Bank of England, which in return gives you money to pay for public services, it created the money out of nothing. Right? But austerity, yeah, universal credit, let's screw the worst off people in the world based on this illusion of debt. Let's screw them. Let's drive people to suicide. Let's introduce lunatic programs like bedroom tax. All of it completely unnecessary. And I've talked about it too long and too often on this program, but I continue to do so because people don't understand it.
No taking Britain back to square one. But
yeah, if only you could believe it. 26 minutes past the hour. That was Theresa May today. No more of the party conferences now. They're all over. Back to the drudgery, I suppose, of occasionally reporting on Prime Minister's questions. On Wednesdays, we're going to take a very quick break. When I come back, Deborah Tavares joins us live from California. I know there will be questions for Deborah. Please tweet them. It's best to tweet them. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. At Richie Allen Show on Twitter. We are live. Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, triggerwarning.tv, the Cogent Radio app, TuneIn Radio, and of course on richieallen.co.uk. Thanks for choosing the programme. Thanks for listening to it. Now, break back with Deborah Tavares in exactly 60 seconds.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever. Forever.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
The Richie Allen Show relies on your support. Go to richieallen.co.uk and set up a monthly donation today.
Welcome back. 27 and a half minutes past the hour. Let me just read a few tweets there as they're coming in thick and fast. Hi to JP in Manchester, the Base Ninja. To Andy Newman. Andy tweets, the Bank of England and the Federal Reserve are the biggest examples of fuckery in the entire world. Indeed they are. Indeed they are. Hi to Moinga as well, who says, who knew mimes and gestures would become the social norm of appreciation? Yeah, David tweets, these are the type of people who use the term unsettling because, God forbid, their tender equilibrium is unsettled. All floaty on fluffy clouds of candy floss and cotton wool. David referring there to the earlier stories about, what was the first story I did today? Minnesota and non-binary. These people who are non-gendered, who've won the right in Minnesota to have the X option placed on driver's license application forms. How wonderful. How you doing, Paul? Paul Alawi tweets, Richie, common sense should prevail and the safeguarding of people should always come before the feelings of a few or empowering their sense of entitlement. I guess that's the rub. It's never been clearer that we're being divided and forced to think before we say or do anything, and that is absolutely right. Absolutely right. It is imposing on society and on people, large numbers of people, a form of self-censorship where people not only think very hard before they say anything lest they offend, but also lest they get into trouble. And the consequence of that is you find people all the time, without even realising it subconsciously, they're looking for opportunities to virtue signal, to remind the establishment that I'm all right. Now, this is very subconscious most of the time. This is why people don't argue about this non-binary bullshit. Subconsciously. When they see stuff like that, they give it tacit or sometimes warm approval. On social media, they approve it. Because you've got to be seen to approve it, right? You've got to be seen to be going along with it. How dangerous is that? Right? Okay. 5:30, and it's time to welcome my only guest today to our programme. Now, I've enjoyed swapping emails with her, to be honest, over the last couple of weeks since we connected to one another. A number of you were in touch with me over the years to get me to invite her on. And what it was I invited her on the programme about a year or so ago. And it turns out she never received the email I sent her through the website. And I'll give you all the details of the website as we go along. And it happens all the time. It happens to me all the time. When you send information to me through our website, it doesn't always reach me, and it's nobody's fault. It does sometimes. And Hayden is brilliant at sending me stuff that has come through, but a lot of times it doesn't get through to me, and we're working on it. We don't have thousands of pounds to spend on websites. The website is lovely. It's a beautiful looking website. I'm really happy with it. But all the other stuff that goes on behind the scenes of a website, and there's issues with it, and that's the way it is. But anyway, Deborah, we eventually connected, and I think she's an incredible woman, and I'm looking forward to speaking with her now, and we're going to get her on. She's remarkable, really. There's so much that we could talk about with her in terms of who she is and what she's done. She had her own self-employed business for many years, building homes, apartments, townhomes and commercial buildings. But like everybody else, she fell foul of a rigged system and was ripped off. Like many other family-run businesses and personal businesses, they didn't know that they were getting effectively screwed by the banks and by their financial institutions. She has an amazing website which is called stopthecrime.net, and I urgently recommend that you spend some time on that website, stopthecrime.net, because it is packed with years of research into the subject matter that we're going to talk about today. The rollout of 5G, the weather warfare that we are experiencing, the weaponization of the weather, how our assets are being stripped all over the world. It isn't exclusive to the United States. It isn't exclusive to the United Kingdom. She says that we are all experiencing a massive global transformation, a disruption on every level. and we are being acid stripped, displaced by weather weapons, and murdered. Again, check out the website, stopthecrime.net. Live from California, let's welcome to the program Deborah Tavares. Deborah, it's an honor. How are you?
Well, thank you, Richie, so much for having me on. We are experiencing just unbelievable realities here in what's left of Northern California after dozens of fires this past fire season, which we're being assured is an ongoing and continuous event. In fact, they have daily reminders on our radio shows that the saying now is ready, set, go. This is now occurring every single day. And also right now, we are going to have, in just a couple of hours here on the West Coast, a nationwide emergency alert test planned for today, October 3rd of 2019. It's going to test messages that will be sent to cell phones, TV, and radio. And it's intended to warn the public about emergencies. Of course, these are war alerts. These are weaponized weather attacks that they're alerting us about. These are war sirens, war messages on our phones and cell phones. We are being attacked. And this is what they're doing. Now they're going to warn us. They're going to test this nationwide system today. And they say that the test was previously postponed due to the response efforts to Hurricane Florence. So we're under mass assault throughout the entire world. When you hear me talk on the show, Richie, today, and I refer to the United States or I refer to what is happening here in California, it's only to be an example of what other people throughout the world are experiencing on different levels. Sadly, I hear time and time again that people say, oh, California is the pilot test program for all of these things. It is not. It is not. And I can only say what I'm going to read to you right now, and everybody can look at this article. You might be as amazed as I am. I just saw this a moment or two ago, Richie. It's on the Nation World newspaper. It's an article by the Associated Press, Wednesday, October 3rd, 2018. EPA may relax radiation policy. Experts say Trump's officials moving to ease regulations on exposure. Washington. The EPA is pursuing rule changes that experts say would weaken the way radiation exposure is regulated, turning to scientific outliers who argue that a bit of radiation damage is actually good for you.
Wow.
A bit of radiation damage is good. Now, let's look at what happened here in 1990 and elsewhere as well. In 1990, the U.S. EPA proposal to classify microwaves and other electromagnetic fields as a Class B1 probable carcinogen was squashed by the White House. Again, this was in 1990. And the EPA was stripped of all of its radiation labs, and key EPA scientists were all disciplined. Here's something else that's very significant and how this bleeds over into the rollout of 5G and all of the other meters and frequencies that are layering our cities and causing us to have tremendous, tremendous illnesses. And I would like to encourage everyone, go to stopthecrime.net, go to the homepage, and please print off the symptoms list of what the frequencies are causing. At this point, it would be fair to say that most everybody in some way and or another are experiencing health effects and damage from the increased frequencies. We're certainly noticing now in large cities where we may go to attend a rally or something, we're not able to go anymore because the frequencies then are turned up to amp up the moods of the people at those rallies. This is now becoming very commonplace. But in 1996, the Telecommunications Act suspended the rights to freely discuss health effects from cell towers that were being sited and we couldn't discuss these health effects at any meetings, and we couldn't alter the placement of cell towers unless it was for aesthetics only. And what was buried deep into the landmark bill of the 1996 Telecommunication Act in Section 704, a Wisconsin senator inserted a little-known clause that prevents local governments from hearing objections or challenges to cell tower placement based on possible health impacts forever. Forever. And that is why our current CEO of this USA Inc., which we're all part of Earth Inc., it's all the same. We have borders and flags just to advantage wars, just so that people will fight for the illusion of their flag and country, but while they're, of course, financed by the bankers on all fronts. We're all facing global horrors of the overhead aerial chemtrailing, and we're going to get into that.
Definitely,
because, prior to the fires, we were very, very heavily chemtrailed. And we were heavily chemtrailed during the fires, which held all of the toxins and pollutants down low in our area. Many people now are having lung issues. There have been a number of deaths already. We have been marinated in the toxins. And I can say the displacement of people here in Northern California, a number of people that have left is just unmeasurable still at this time.
People are leaving, Deborah. This is extraordinary stuff now for many of our listeners. Let me just say one thing here. I think your research is impeccable. I've spent a lot of time on the website over the last couple of weeks cross-referencing stuff, not because I wanted to impugn you or try to catch you out, but just I had to do it in advance of you coming on. And your research is impeccable. And there are two questions coming through on Twitter from our audience about what you've just described. Could the geoengineering be also used to act as an accelerant for those fires, number one? And number two, when you talked a moment ago about how we're seeing the health effects everywhere from the radiation in cities, what's the most common one? Is it sleeplessness? Is it irritation? Is it anxiety? So two good questions there. Is the geoengineering acting as an accelerant to the fires, number one?
Absolutely. The aluminum oxide is an accelerant, and the fires are burning faster and hotter than ever before. Wow. In fact, Richie, there's a very good YouTube on stopthecrime.net. Go to the YouTube channel. It was meant to poke fun at Pacific Gas and Electric, who is our utility up here, run by Rothschild, which all the utilities throughout the entire planet are run by Rothschild and Company. And I would urge everybody to take a look at this because it really does outline exactly what is happening. So if you go to stopthecrime.net to the YouTube channel and scroll down, you'll see a man dressed up like a utility man, and it's called PG&E. And I would watch it. It's only about 3 minutes. It really discusses exactly what we've been talking about here. We also know that the smart meters were pulsed the night of the fires. We had brownouts prior to the fires. In fact, the water company up here had to convert to backup generators. Now, keep in mind, since the fires, Rothschild, aka our utility company, PG&E, has said that they will shut down the power to help stop fires and the burns as a result of their lines. Well, what that will do is that will not allow people in country areas to access water for their pumps and wells should they wish to hose down their properties, maybe in light of the fire being a few hours away. We've had, and I would recommend everyone that is listening, please, understand this is war. Understand that if you have trees near your home, we highly, highly recommend that you limb them up. Reduce the wind load against trees. It's time to take action. We can't sit back and hear these kinds of conversations that you're knowing are fully documented and sit there and not have a battle plan. because we are absolutely being hit with weather weapons. And the weather refugees and the economic refugees are evident in the increased homelessness throughout the entire world. This is all planned. This is all part of what Rothschild and the minions have done and are doing to us. I want to urge everybody to download Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. It's a document that I've referred to many, many times. But just to discuss briefly what that document discusses, it's really a quiet weapon, a quiet warfare that's being conducted using biological warfare, fought with silent weapons and more, energy weapons as well.
It's brilliant,
and
Deborah. It's brilliant.
We have... I'm sorry?
It's brilliant. It's great that you refer to it. It's absolutely brilliant. It's a vital, It's one of the most important pieces of literature that I've ever come across.
It is. And it was the first chapter in Behold a Pale Horse that was written a number of years ago as well. But this policy was adopted by the international elites at the first Bilderberg meeting in 1954, and a copy, they say, was found in 1969. What it is, a silent weapons system operates upon data obtained from a docile public by legal, because now I want to just underscore when they say by legal. We are currently organized under an illegal, corrupt system. So when they say that a silent weapons system operates upon data obtained from a docile public, first of all, we're docile because we've been substantially poisoned and lobotomized by all of the toxins in our food, air, and water supply, vaccines, and more. And then they say by legal, because for the illegal running of this world, all of these horrific things are legal. So I'm going to start reading that again because I broke that down. But a silent weapons system operates upon data obtained from a docile public by legal, but not always lawful, force. When the government is able to collect tax and seize private property without justification, it is an indication that the public is ripe for surrender and is consenting to enslavement and legal encroachment. War is therefore the balancing system by killing the true creditors, the public, which they have taught to exchange true value for inflated currencies, and falling back on whatever is left of the resources of nature and regeneration of those resources. I will tell you, they are massively assaulting our ability to fall back on nature or the regeneration of any resources, because everything under our feet and over our heads is being intentionally poisoned. We are, in fact, being genocided. And it pains me to have to come to that conclusion after so many years of not knowing and then taking a deep dive into reality. And it was not an easy journey by any means. But we know that the report from Iron Mountain certainly revealed the fact that it was about to determine the minimum and optimum levels of destruction of life, of property, and the pollution of natural resources. So that is what that report was about. And it was released back when John F. Kennedy was murdered, and Johnson and others said it was fake. It was never fake. And I would highly recommend that people become familiar with that. But I would also, Richie, you were going to say something? I
wanted to ask you, are you surprised? And your journey has been over 10. Well, your life journey has been your entire life, of course. But in researching what you've been researching and putting this information out there, are you sometimes surprised? Because you see, when I was on your website, I was stunned at the level of hard evidence that you provided, the links to papers and documentation and to newspaper articles. And I looked at it, Deborah, and I thought, why is this information in plain sight? Is it arrogance? Is it because those people who are behind it, and you mentioned the Rothschild, Warburg, Rockefeller, Oppenheimer cartels. Are they so smug and self-satisfied in their arrogance that they won't be stopped, that this information is out there for people like you to find? It's readily available. Are you surprised by that? How easy it is to find out?
I'm not, because certainly we hear, and I can't prove this, but I've heard over the years that it is a requirement under the code that they reveal everything and then before they're able to do it.
To do with consent, is it?
But I can tell you too,
Yeah.
Richie, by revealing all of this and by our conversation right now and the lack of people understanding reality also shows their success at lobotomizing all of us with the fluorides and the poisons in the food. So really, we're in the jaws of death and danger, and many people are not able to respond. And I think it's a way in which for them to, as I just read a moment ago out of the silent weapons system, that they say that it's an indication that the public is ripe for surrender and consenting. So they're getting it out there. We're consenting. Voting is consenting.
Yeah.
Voting in this illegitimate representative illusion of governments worldwide is our consent to go forward with policies that are in place in every city, in every level. And I believe that one of your tweets asked about the wireless devices, and I wanted to address that.
Brilliant question it was from one of our listeners. Because you're convinced, and I think you're right, that because we're surrounded by the towers now and the smart meters and all the pulsing devices, you're convinced that the effects of it are there. They're readily available. People can see it happening. So what are the most common illnesses and symptoms and things that people are experiencing? Our listeners are asking about sleeplessness, sleep disturbances, sleep deprivation, insomnia. What's the most common thing being experienced by people?
Well, yes, those symptoms that you just mentioned, as well as confusion and short-term memory loss, inability to focus, brain fog, and sluggishness in thinking. So I want to add something to brain fog, sluggishness, and thinking. I want to talk about the food supply. People certainly here in the United States are consuming, and elsewhere as well, flour and sugar, and obesity is just outrageous here. That does create brain fog. So when people are overweight, they're unable to think. And this is an intentional method in which they are literally taking people out of the capacity to think. But certainly headaches. Now, when we talk about headaches, many people are not experiencing, I guess for lack of better description, traditional headaches. They're more of an internal push against the outside of, in other words, they come from inside and they push against your head, making you feel like you're swelling inside, because you are. We're being microwaved. And vision disruption or eye problems. And of course, that's occurring with the microwaves as well as with all of the LED lighting, too, on all of our screens. I have a YouTube up on the effects of LED lighting, which is a silent weapons assault on our eyes. They're creating blindness. That's all part of the program. Slow reaction times. That's, again, insomnia, which someone mentioned. Night sweats. Again, we're being microwaved. The Cooking of Humanity, which is a YouTube that we have up, is very powerful. There's a backstory, though, to that YouTube, and I'll just finish a few aspects of other symptoms. But again, I would request everybody download the symptom list. Keep it with you. Understand the types of assaults that we are experiencing. Rapid aging, oxidative damage, lack of oxygen. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Skin problems and rashes, skin irritation, ear pain, tinnitus, bedwetting and urinary tract and problems. In fact, in 1950, over San Francisco, there was a chemical and biological attack on San Francisco. It was called Operation C, S-E-A, spray. And they used chemicals and biologicals that caused urinary tract infections, and there were no methods to solve what those attacks caused. Again, that's Operation C spray. Also, electronic harassment and mind control is also all part of the wireless assaults on us. Loss of employment, chronic fatigue, exhaustion, mood disorders. We're going to see, and we're going to see more and more people exhibiting erratic behavior. And for that, I would refer everyone to Operation Crimson Mist. Operation Crimson Mist. I was always wondering about the Rwanda genocide back in the mid-90s. It didn't make a lot of sense that one tribe would butcher and murder and sexually assault babies and women and girls and men. Over a million people were slaughtered. And I found a very interesting article, or actually a report, on the effects of the genocide and how the media participated in inflaming all of that by standing down. And what then surfaced was this Operation Crimson Mist, where groups on the ground were inciting the Hutu and the Tutsi tribes, and rightfully so. There were differences between the two tribes. There was a meeting that was organized where the two leaders of the tribes met, and the CIA blew the leadership up on one day. So that inflamed tension between the tribes. Of course, this was all a covert operation. And what they had ready on the tarmac near the Hutu tribe were C-130 Hercules planes armed with microwaves that they beamed these microwaves over the Hutus and inflamed their anger, exacerbated an anger that was already there. So they thought this anger was their own, and they became raging murderers.
It was artificial, Deborah. Now, for the skeptics, and going out on commercial radio here, we always have skeptics listening. That isn't a bad thing. Remind our listeners how we know that this technology was used in the mid-1990s in Rwanda. How do we know this?
Well, we have the documents. We have Operation Crimson Mist, and you can look up those documents. You can also look up a document that I recently have in a YouTube called Coastlines Under Attack. Storm surges artificially created. Let me say that again, because this is a worldwide assault on our coastlines. The YouTube is called, and you can see it on stopthecrime.net, Coastlines Under Attack. Storm surge artificially created. And there is a report, the final report of Project SEAL, S-E-A-L. And we can talk about that when we get back from the break, Richie. But the enormity of what we face and the reality of how we now need to act is here. We must really let people know as best we can. Certainly, prepping in different ways is extremely important. We're being poisoned by our sewer and wastewater treatment, which I sent you a number of articles.
Yeah, you did. Brilliant stuff. And we will get into that. I'm just mindful of time. We've got about 45 to 50 minutes. That's how fast time is flying. We are going to take a 60-second break. I want to remind our listeners that we're joined today by Deborah Tavares. I'm delighted that Deborah's on the programme, finally. Check out stopthecrime.net. Find it on YouTube as well. I will tweet links to it if you haven't come across it before. I'm well aware that many listeners to this programme are more than familiar with Deborah and her work. But if you're new to it, stopthecrime.net. Deborah, when we come back from a 60-second break, I know it's difficult to talk about things that are happening right now, But some of our listeners are conscious that 2,000 people and counting are dead in Indonesia. And I've had an email from a listener who says that he believes that there is evidence that storm systems are created in third world countries to destroy those countries, to leave them wide open for the NGOs and the foundations to come in and to rape and pillage those countries. And he reckons...
That's absolutely true, and we're going to talk about
do that,
documents.
Right?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Let's say that.
We'll do a 60-second break. When we come back, we can speculate about Indonesia. Deborah Tavares, our guest, back in exactly 60 seconds. This is the Richie Allen Show, live on Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, triggerwarning.tv. Download the Cogent Radio app. We're on TuneIn Radio as well as richieallen.co.uk. More from Deborah Tavares in exactly 60 seconds.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever. Forever.
Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show.
Right, it's 6 o'clock. It is 6 p.m. here in Manchester in the UK, 7 p.m. Central European Time. Deborah Tavares is our guest. Check out stopthecrime.net if you haven't before. Deborah, it's a pleasure to have you on the programme. Thanks for doing it today. I really appreciate that. Indonesia then. What do we make of what's happening in Indonesia? It looks like a very familiar story there.
Yes, and I think everyone is starting to realize that the weather weapons assaults, the economic assaults that we're seeing in Venezuela and Argentina, now bleeding on over into Ecuador, Indonesia, that your comments were about weather weapons and assaults, and then the asset stripping that occurs and the vultures flock in. So let's talk about the vultures, because that is happening. And I'm going to refer to a mission statement that I found a number of years back. Now, many of you may know I was very, very active, and then I was MIA for a couple of years. I was massively attacked, and I was attacked during the time that I was on the Rinse Radio Network, and I was interviewing a number of people. And I want to refer to this YouTube because I hadn't listened to it for a number of years, but it's very important for people to hear this YouTube now because I explain how government works, and it also pertains to what we're going to see increases happening in our community of people that are labeled conspiracy theorists and delusional, and they become trapped in a drugged mental illness system. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. I want to address what you just asked me, though, about. But here's the YouTube that I'd like everybody to take a look at. It's called Hunted, Kidnapped, Forcibly Drugged. Hunted, Kidnapped, and Forcibly Drugged. And that was an interview that I did with a heavily, heavily targeted individual whom I knew quite well. And what happened in the ensuing days, that she was picked up and not charged and put into a mental hospital. Very important to listen to that YouTube. But what I found, and this is, well, getting back, I guess, to the intentionality of the weather attacks, and this being the modus operandi, particularly against the third world countries. They're taking them out. Certainly they tell us in the World Bank documents that third world countries and countries that do not address climate policies are causing a risk to global profits. So certainly when you are a risk to global profits, you've got to be eliminated. And people that are not contributing to taxes, enslavement, etc., are a risk to the global profits as we're now being completely restructured. But I found this a few years ago, Richie, and this will explain what's happening with weather weapons, because they're completely rebuilding all of our cities, and therefore they have to tear the existing cities down or destroy them. And we have literally a new wildlands map. Many of you might be familiar with the wildlands map that we have here in the United States, but there is now a new expanded map of where we will all be forced to live. And I will talk about that in a minute. But this is a statement, a mission statement that we found out of Pennsylvania when I was working on smart meters and the deployment of this stealth spy equipment that could be pulsed and increased frequencies in our homes, certainly part of death machine, as well as tracking and monitoring, etc. I will throw in that there's suspicion that a number of the homes that did not burn here in Northern California during that October 2017 fire, some of them did not have smart meters. So it's important to understand that the smart meters were used during the fires again, as well as the aluminum oxide, which was an accelerant. We've all been basted throughout the world with that. I would recommend to everybody that has not yet had an opportunity to listen to the YouTube we put up a few years before the fires. It's called Plan to Burn Up Northern California. Plan to Burn Up Northern California. Now understand, you can put the name of your country in too. Anywhere where they can justify fires as a result of killing off the trees. And there's a lot packed in that YouTube. I just can't say it all in our brief time, Richie. But what I do want to read is a mission statement. This is extremely important. We found this out of the Pennsylvania Smart Infrastructure Incubator, Carnegie Mellon Engineering, etc. And IBM is involved with this as well, and of course now Google. But actually, yes, I'm going to talk about Google in a minute, but here we go with this mission statement. Revolution in our infrastructure. Pennsylvania's companies and institutions have a hidden secret. They are leading a revolution in our infrastructure. Pennsylvania wants to help expose that secret to the world. Tomorrow's infrastructure, which is now today, okay, will blend traditional physical infrastructure, which is transportation and transit systems, buildings, pipes, power grid, concrete, and steel, with new cyber infrastructure, computers, networks, and sensors, in ways that were just emerging. Pennsylvania has a wealth of companies, universities, and institutions that are inventing many of these emerging technologies that will build or rebuild the world's transportation, civil, manufacturing, and other infrastructure worldwide. Pennsylvania will bring these organizations together to leverage and highlight this hidden secret. So when you look at this, and you asked me earlier about they're telling us all these things.
It's there for you. Yeah.
It's all there. And people just aren't spending or able to spend the amount of time. And rightfully understood. I can appreciate that because we're having to work 2 jobs. We have children. Many of us now have children that are sadly disadvantaged from some of the kinds of toxins, the vaccinations, all kinds of parental increased needs now on the home front. People aren't able to do this kind of investigative work. And that's really our contribution, because I was and we were in that situation ourselves. So I understand. But I've got to announce this. This is just mind-blowing. and this is an emerging terror attack advance warning, okay? Because what we have now is Google's new tool to fight climate change. Now, I want to underscore what is happening with climate change. I would urge everybody to take a look at the 1960 CIA Memorandum for Climate Change. You'll find that on stopthecrime.net. I would say one of the most important takeaways in understanding the definition of reducing our CO2 and our greenhouse gas emissions is this. Reduction of CO2 equals oxygen depletion. That is what is happening. And not only in the air, but in the water. So keep that in mind. All of the policies, the climate action plans that are in your cities, type in the name of your city, wherever you are, wherever you're listening. Type in the name of your city, followed by, on that search line on your computer, followed by climate action and resilient plan. You will see that your city leaders have entwined you in policies of death. That's what these policies are. These are pre-crime. You talked about, well, why aren't they telling us about these things? They are. Look at the climate action plans. They're criminal plans. And it's a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, genocide, reducing oxygen, displacement, massive displacement.
You're
reorganizing everything, transportation. Do you know, Richie, they're eliminating petroleum. They've sold us the idea for so long that we were going to use up fossil fuels and we'd run out. Well, now they're getting ready and are transitioning us out of fossil fuels. And I know this may sound crazy to some of your listeners. It sounded crazy to me at first, too. Go to stopthecrime.net. Click on our link, Kiss Your Gas Goodbye. Our petroleum worldwide is being eliminated and reduced. They're reducing our access to resources for better control. And
can I just jump in there, Deborah? Can I just jump in there? Because you've staggered me. Because I while you were speaking there, I was, of course, listening to you. But at the same time, I did type in the key words and Manchester, which is where I am. And holy Jesus, Deborah, you're right. It's come right up. The Zero Carbon Manchester Climate Change Strategy Plan for 2018, and I'm going through it as I'm speaking to you. It's exactly as you said. It's incredible. And you were saying quite rightly, people need only substitute California with the city they happen to be living in now, and they'll get the same nonsense. It's nonsense.
Well, it may be nonsense, but they're doing it.
But they're doing it, yeah.
They're doing it. So we know that it is being done intentionally. This is genocide. They're selling us a lie. People are not paying attention. All of you need to pay attention. War has been declared. They have told us what they are doing. In fact, many people ask, where can we go? Where can we move to be safe? Well, I can tell you, Richie, we've traveled to Russia back in 2017. We've gone to South America, not because we figured that they weren't doing any of these things in those locations, because there are no borders. Remember, there are no wars, again, are conducted. They have to create the illusion of borders. There are no borders. All the chemtrailing, all of the frying, all of this is happening. And it's borderless. But I can only say that in regards to the gas, there's a new slogan here in Northern California. It says, they say diesel free by 33. That means diesel, the use of diesel, no diesel by 2033.
You're right.
Now this is global. Can you imagine what's going to happen to industry?
To agriculture.
Everything.
Yeah.
Well, I've got to get into some more information, but I want to say, as far as the small cells and the deployment of the 5G, it's very important for everyone to understand that your utility poles that are under the jurisdiction of your utilities, are granting Rothschild and the purveyors of the wireless corporations to deploy 5G on all of those poles. Your cities can no longer say no. There's the illusion here in California that some of the cities, while they have said they want a moratorium or they don't want to deploy 5G, sadly, I would suggest that you don't listen to that in the sense that it doesn't matter what they say. They're not governing the poles that the 5G is being deployed on. Very important to understand that. And by executive order here in the United States, there's to be a rapid deployment of small cells across this entire country, with minimizing any pushback. It's to roll out quickly, and they're to report on a regular basis. Look at the executive order that was signed on January 8th of 2018. This is global. This is a deployment. This is a massive increase in planned genocide rates. Now, I want to just throw this out right here because you heard me say the word genocide. I have on StopTheCrime.net on the YouTube channel an interview with Dr. Bill Deagle. I'm on his radio show every Monday at 2 p.m. Pacific time, and we discussed the Deagle.com intelligent website, not the same spelling as Dr. Deagle, but we discussed that because it talks about the planned population reductions with an integrative map, chart, and percentages. Now, Richie, I had never seen anything that laid it out like this, the planned murder rates throughout the entire world, until I saw that website. And it's diabolical, and it is. Just as an example, the integrative maps show the planned reduction of the population in the United States is to be reduced by 83% by the year 2025.
By 2025, Deborah?
2025.
How could
People
they do
Australia. Australia is 50%. As I recall, the UK, now I want everybody to verify this, but as I recall, it was 73%. So you can look at that, go to StopTheCrime.net, look at that YouTube that we talk about, 5G, the planned culling of humanity. The two components of this planned increased murder rate are based around two factors that they say in this report. One of the factors is increased suicide. Now, we know with the expansion of the wireless, they're able to psychotronically implant thoughts, just like they did with Operation Crimson Mist. People are going to feel very set upon by all of the weather weapons that they've experienced and all of the economic hardship. We are in a situation here, as in many places throughout the world, where people cannot afford housing. Certainly after we were hit by the weather weapons and the fires and the floods and all of the other disasters, now we've got a new mosquito that's attacking California. It's going on and on and on. I'll just throw this in right now, too. After Hurricane Harvey in Houston, the Pentagon had the U.S. Air Force spray Houston for mosquitoes with Nelid. That's a Monsanto product. It's a neurological disruptor. It's illegal in Europe. They say it's illegal. So they won't spray it over Europe. But they're indicating that they're going to start spraying for mosquitoes after Hurricane Florence. And so it'll be curious to follow whether they poison those people from overhead, because they've already certainly swamped a lot of the sewer treatment plants, which is an entirely additional conversation. But again, we look at the World Bank. We look at what's happening, what they're telling us is happening with water. They're eliminating water, our access to water. They have everyone believing that water is a finite resource. It is not. And probably the best information that I'm going to be able to say on this program today, Richie, is go to our other website, primarywater.org, primarywater.org. We have half-page flyers. Understand, we are not running out of water. You will understand how water is really made by hydrogen and oxygen down below the mantle of the earth. Once it becomes vapor, you can't contain that. It must surface, and it does. That's why we have oases throughout the world, hot and cold springs that bubble up no matter what they're doing with the droughts overhead by all of the weather weaponization. We still are having water bubbling up. Geysers that spray up out of the ground. There's a beautiful geyser. People can type this in. It's called Fly Geyser, F-L-Y, geyser. It's in the United States. Take a look at that. Beautiful water just emitting. It was a well that was drilled 100 or so years ago. The water was too hot because they did get into magma, so they capped it off, and the cap blew off, and so you have the results of Fly Geyser. But where you see also the results of primary water are on the tops of the mountains in Hawaiian Islands, and in many locations it never snows. It's not in a valley. And yet you'll see water continuously cascade into beautiful ponds down below. That's another example of primary water.
They'll make water, won't they, Deborah? Sorry to interrupt you, because there's questions coming in. I want to just remind, because listeners are joining, I'm sure, because it's drive time. It's just after work time here in the UK. Deborah Tavares is our guest. StopTheCrimes.net. Check it out. I've put links out to the website and to all the videos that Deborah has spoken about. But there are questions coming in, and there are one or two skeptics, and we certainly don't duck those questions. Chris Morell is listening in Hampshire. Thanks for the tweet, Chris. He says, Richie, I'm listening to Deborah talking about how they, in inverted commas, are taking our gas, petrol away. Well, I don't know about Manchester, but here in Hampshire, the air reeks all the time of petrol. The sooner we are all in hybrid and electric cars, the better, says Chris. And there will be listeners listening to this who will agree with Chris. Deborah, what do you say to that?
Well, electric cars are only a short future, in the sense that it's all going to be going into autonomous vehicles. That's the goal.
Well said.
Because we're being rounded up and forced out of homes because of weather weapons into tight, compact human settlement zones, which they call smart cities or resilient cities. Now let's talk about the intentional poisoning. There is large industry intentional poisoning of our air and polluting our air. This is being intentionally done by big industry. That, again, as I mentioned earlier in the report from Iron Mountain, it talks about the determination of the optimum levels of life and the destruction of property and the destruction of natural resources. So when you think in terms of looking at trying to reduce your carbon footprint, understand we're being poisoned, and we're being swayed into a reality that doesn't exist. And it's important to know, too, that petroleum never came from dead dinosaurs. It is not a fossil fuel. And I don't think people realize that. And what people do need to realize is the intentionality of the misuse of our resources to poison us. That is what is happening. That is what's happening.
And water
now,
is going to become...
I'm all about conservation.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Sorry to interrupt you. It's good that you're going to talk about... We're all for cleaner air and cleaner energy. And I get... Not with Chris, the listener. Chris makes an interesting point. But I get annoyed with other people when they try to mix up or conflate two different issues. Climate change or, a dirty planet. We shouldn't conflate them. I don't believe that man is changing the climate through industrial activity. I don't believe that. However, I do believe that dumping plastic into the oceans is a terrible thing. And I know you do too, Deborah. It's not about that. Just wanted to make that point. Go ahead.
Well, that's absolutely the case. And now they're transitioning us out of petroleum worldwide. So the disruption factor for that, all of the gasoline cars that we have, you have to wonder where those are going to be scrapped out. And we know that this will be over time, but we are being transitioned into electric vehicles and then into autonomous vehicles. And people need to understand the autonomous vehicles run on LiDAR. They're literally computers on wheels, and they pulsate out 1 million times a second a perimeter around that vehicle for being able to see anything that might be in its way, and then that information comes back to the onboard supercomputer. They are driverless. This is the plan. There are plans for autonomous vehicles in many cities, in Portland, Oregon, for example, by creating costs for tolls, roads, by not using the gasoline money tax here in the United States for the repair of the roads. They're confining us into cities. We're not meant to drive on the roads here anymore. They're being literally becoming impossible to travel on. And that is how they're going to move people out of the country areas into the cities. So again, getting back to the Intel site, Deagle.com, and the genocide plan, the two components for that, for increasing the murder rates worldwide, is suicide. The second is the inability to psychologically adjust after being relocated from country homes where they're saying it's not sustainable to be in the country. It costs too much, and it's considered sprawl. We are being forced into cities, and there is a new map, a world map, that shows where the mega cities are located, will be located, and the majority of people will be contained within those cities.
Super cities.
I'm sorry?
Super cities, right. So this is why you've got the fires in California and the destruction of the land through fracking and everything else, Deborah. I've been reading your website for the last 2 weeks and watching your videos, how you're connecting all the pieces of the jigsaw together. This is why the rural areas are being rendered uninhabitable for this very reason.
Yes, in fact, my alert would be too. I would again encourage everybody to go to primarywater.org. There are half-page flyers on that website that everyone can download. I would please urge everyone to do your own research. We're not running out of water, but this is a way in which to finally control everything, including the food supply and our land as well. The EPA documents tell us that when we are rendered an area that cannot access water because we've exceeded our groundwater allotment, we will be considered unhealthy, and they will relocate us to areas where we can have potable water. What is happening right now in California, and you'll see this elsewhere as well, is they have private well drilling bans. There has been a moratorium against well drilling in Ventura County, which is an agricultural area in central California up against the coast. And I have so much to talk about with saltwater intrusion and sea level rise and how that is being exacerbated by the over-pumping intentionally of aquifers, and then creating the illusion that we've run out of water, when all they have to do is what Muammar Gaddafi did with the eighth wonder of the world, the Great Man-Made River project. Go and take a look at that. You can watch that being built on YouTube. That was blown up when we attacked Libya. It resulted in an enormous humanitarian crisis because Muammar Gaddafi had used oil profits to get that water, primary water, to 75% of the Libyan people that were nearest the massive labyrinth of plumbing that was under the desert. That was blown up. We're not supposed to know about primary water, but you do now. So spread this information out far and wide. We don't live long without water, and the entire food structure of the world is being reorganized and being literally reintroduced. They're absolutely collapsing farming. In the NASA war document, they say that we're in an evolution where robotics will now become the farms. Well, it's not what you think. Robots watering the lawn, the farms, robots harvesting the crops. We're talking about a new methodology of growing food, completely reorganizing the food supply with scientists and different people controlling for example, how our lettuce is grown. They're turning it into water plants and putting the vitamins and minerals into it. In fact, when we were at a conference in San Francisco some years ago, we ended up, interestingly enough, in a pharmaceutical meeting. And I don't know how they allowed us to stay. There weren't that many people there, but they were talking about rebranding pharmaceuticals. And what they said was unreal, but it is what is happening. Rebranding pharmaceuticals as food. Rebranding pharmaceuticals as food. And that is what is happening. And Big Pharma is part of the genocide program.
Deborah, on food, can I jump in on food? Sorry to meander. Let's call this today part one, and we'll get you back on whenever you've got an opportunity in a couple of weeks or next month, and we'll do part two. So I'm meandering a little bit, and I want to go back to something you said earlier on, because now that we're back to food, when you do your weekly shopping at the local grocery shop, the supermarket, and you bring it back, you put stuff in the fridge, obviously. You put stuff in the freezer, obviously. Some people do. And then you take the fresher produce and you put it in cupboards. Are smart meters and Wi-Fi devices affecting the quality of the food that's in your cupboards?
Absolutely. It's the frequencies, everything is a frequency. Everything is being affected by the frequencies. Everything. So absolutely. And I wanted to just go over a couple of the corporations, because you had someone ask about weather weapons and taking down communities, third world countries. That's absolutely what is happening. The hit is on the countries that they are believing is holding the global production down. But this is very interesting. I'm going to kick it out now, and we're going to have to discuss this some more. But beyond climate action plans and resilient plans that everyone can look into them for themselves, you will find the ways in your area that you're being told in those plans you're going to be impacted by climate change. This is extremely important to understand, because we all recognize that geoengineering or weather weapons is the deliberate large-scale manipulation of the Earth's climate. So knowing that, you can look in your climate action plans, because they will tell you the kinds of assaults that you will be confronted with. And an example of that is, and I'm just looking in a random climate action plan, and people need to look this up for themselves in their area, but here's an example, and then I've got to get into something else. Climate change health effects. Climate change effects, they say that there will be increase in extreme heat events. Now, I want to say something right now about this. We're looking at climate action plan and climate documents, Richie, and this is absolutely horrific. We're being told that coastal cities such as San Francisco, that has always been known for its very pleasant climate, generally people do not have air conditioning there because it's not necessary. They're saying that there will be a change in prolonged heat events that will not be registered on the thermostat.
Wow.
I'm pausing. I'm pausing because they're going to be intentionally increased microwaves.
Which is the obvious conclusion, that something is going to happen to affect that. It's not going to happen naturally. And that's
absolutely.
Going to
so let me go on down this list. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm getting out of your way, Deborah. Go ahead, because we've got about 16 minutes left.
Okay, so
Go
again,
ahead.
increase in extreme heat events, increase air pollution, floods, droughts, wildfires, storms, changes in weather patterns, higher food prices and food scarcity, sea level rise, storm surge, longer red tides, toxic algae blooms. Well, we know in Florida they just declared a state emergency on toxic red algae blooms. This is all being intentionally created because they can, and they do, and they are. That's why I recommend everybody, again, I have another YouTube up. It's called Weather and Water Weaponized. Listen to that YouTube. weather and water weaponized. So they say in this climate action plan that the human health effects and risks as a result of these assaults, intentional assaults, will be heat-related illnesses and death, worsening of chronic health disorders, increased respiratory and illness, seasonal allergies. Well, I can tell you after the fires here, we have many increased ailments with breathing difficulties and a number of deaths. But they go on to say in this climate action plan, respiratory illnesses, waterborne illnesses, foodborne illnesses, displacement, we've talked about that, increased homelessness, etc., stress-related disorders, mental health impacts, and an increased shift in infectious disease. So the release of weaponized and biowarfare as well. Yeah. But increased hunger and decreased nutrition. So that decreased nutrition would certainly also involve how the food supplies are not only being assaulted overhead with the chemicals that are being sprayed on plant production, but then also all of the frequencies as well. But again, wastewater system impacts, and I've covered that quite in detail. I have a YouTube up. It just went up. It's called Sewer Poop Tour. Now, I save you from going through a tour of a wastewater treatment plant or a sewer water treatment plant.
Yeah.
You can go on that journey with us. I have to apologize in advance. Yeah. Some of the sound before going on the tour was difficult because we had so many people talking around us. But you're going to get a tour of a sewer treatment plant. And important to understand what is happening with that. The same thing that's happening with our systems here in the United States, Africa, everywhere else. And I sent you what's happening in the UK and in Wales with your wastewater treatment plants as well. They're literally being used as weapons. You can consider them landmines being intentionally placed in different areas all over the world, particularly near streams where it can have the most dangerous damaging effects as all of this leaches into the groundwater supply. But again, in this climate action plan, they say displacement, stress-related disorders, mental health impacts, and poisoning and contaminating of shellfish and ocean fish as well. So we're being told in the various areas where you live, the types of events that you're going to be exposed to. This is war. It has been declared. They've told you in their documents. This is pre-crime disclosure, and these are genocide plans. So for those of you that are aware, don't argue. They're in the plans. Be skeptical if you'd like, but understand your skepticism is going to render you into the percentage of reduced population.
Well, be skeptical if you want, but have the courage and have the decency to look at that evidence that you've uncovered and exposed. Then, if you've done that and you've given it a fair go, then you can say whatever you want, but don't dismiss it out of hand as crazy conspiracy theory. Now, on that, Ruth, who is listening to this program in Australia, where it's in the small hours of Thursday morning, Ruth is asking about, this stuff is in the public domain. People like you are collecting this information and disseminating it. Are they going to come after? Now, this might sound like a stupid question, but it isn't. I know where she's going. Are we going to see an escalation in the demonization of so-called conspiracy theorists? Now, you'll know, Deborah, that a couple of weeks ago we met Suzanne on this program, whose doctor recommended she be given a psychiatric evaluation because she was, very emotional when asking about the dangers of the Wi-Fi towers. So are we going to see this? As this becomes more apparent, are they going to need to shut down the journalists who are asking questions about it?
Well, that's a good question, and I can answer it a couple of different ways. Certainly, I would say this. We're at a time of extreme danger on our streets, and an example of that is here in Northern California. One of the one of the sheriff's areas went out of their jurisdiction actually 40 to 50 miles outside of their patrolling area, and were robbing people that were traveling down the 101 coast route from Northern California towards San Francisco. They were robbing them of their cash and their stash, because Northern California in the Mendocino area is known as the Emerald Triangle for growing pot. And so they were hiding out and robbing and stealing people's cash and so forth. It's dangerous for everybody in different ways. And because we are now being policed by the police, and the rules are criminal, so we have to band together. Those that are starting to become aware of the reality that we live in, we must watch out after one another. And we have to learn how to become good activists so that we are armed with documents that no one can dispute, and we have to know the level of the way in which we put forth information, and possibly take a read on people if you happen to be on the streets and you're passing out flyers, etc. You have to be careful.
Brilliant, yeah.
And I'm going to answer it this way too, Richie, because there's a couple of YouTubes I want people to take a look at. Not only, as I mentioned earlier, the YouTube Hunted, Kidnapped, Forcibly Drugged, but also the YouTube that we have under Hot Radio Topics on stopthecrime.net. It's called Machine Gunned with Pulsed Energy Projectiles by NDP in Zurich, Stop 007. So if you go to stopthecrime.net, go to the Hot Topics, scroll through there, you're going to see a plea from a female scientist in Zurich that is being hit with directed energy weapons. These are the kinds of assaults that people will get.
Catherine Horton, Deborah. Sorry to interrupt. You're referring to Catherine Horton. She came on this program about 2 years ago. She reached out to this program when nobody would speak to her in terms of the BBC or anybody, and she came on this program by pure chance. Catherine, I'm still in touch with her. I'm so glad you brought that up. An Oxford-educated PhD scientist talking about this. It's very important that people understand some very credible people are asking these questions along with Deborah Tavares. This is not conspiracy junk or conspiracy nonsense. This is very serious stuff, and it is happening. You also made a very good point about the media, or the so-called independent media, needs to become better in doing what it does, and it needs to emulate the production values of commercial television and commercial radio, because when it does, it's going to draw more people in to listen to conversations like this, which are vital. It's a tragedy in one sense that while we have a big audience on this program here, it isn't the BBC-sized audience, it isn't a Sky News-sized audience. Millions of people should hear this information tonight, but maybe we'll get there in the very near future, Deborah. We're going to run out of time in about 5 or 6 minutes.
Okay,
you
so
can wrap
I'm going
it
to
up.
just
Go on.
Yeah, I'm just going to talk about a few more things, Richie. I would refer everybody to a YouTube entitled "My Experience as a Targeted Individual." My Experience as a Targeted Individual. Please listen to Part 1 and Part 3. This is explained by Myron May, who, as a targeted individual, ended up being killed in Florida. So I would recommend everybody listen to that. He was alone. He was isolated. No one believed him. When I talk to targeted individuals, I ask them one thing, Richie. I ask them, how can all of us help them? And they tell me, believe us. Look at the documents. Believe us. Because these people are being tortured to death as they are being experimented on for AI and more. So let's talk about what the caller in Australia was wondering about in the targeting. So the targeting is going to increase by psychotronic weapons. The targeting is going to become more cruelty and brutality by a silent weapons system, just like what we heard recently, the attacks on the American diplomats in Havana, Cuba, also some Canadian diplomats as well, and also in China. And we know that was the use of directed energy weapons on these people. We're going to hear more of that. Of course, they call it a mystery illness. But when you look at a lot of the work that Robert Duncan does, and I would recommend another YouTube, and this is not for the faint of heart, but I would really highly recommend this YouTube. It is called, and it's 58 minutes, DARPA Insider Says, Scientist on Verge of Cataclysmic Discovery. Again, DARPA Insider Says, Scientist on Verge of Cataclysmic Discovery. And this is enforced telepathic readings. This is a social revolution and agenda to depopulate the world. And this is done by Dr. Robert Duncan. And he apologizes to the world for being one that was involved in creating many of these technologies that are now being used as weapons against us. So I guess I would wrap up by saying that I hope that we can connect often, because our experiences here in the United States and here in Northern California, where we have been set upon by the vultures as a result of the planned weaponized warfare here with fires. Now we're in a horrific economic situation here. They're saying that we're next year $20 million deficit just in the small town of Santa Rosa alone. And they say by 2025 we're going to be $27 million deficit. I want to also throw this out. This is extremely important. After you're hit with weather weapons, and you all will be, and you all likely are now in many ways, diseases, whatever it is they're throwing at you, they come in with donation opportunities to help fund local organizations. Here they have a local organization here in Northern California called Sonoma County Resilient Foundation. You have to understand, resilience is funded and the takeover mechanism by Rockefeller and Rothschild. Be careful where you donate your money. I can't underscore that enough. There is a movie that was released here in Northern California, and it's called Urban Inferno, The Night Santa Rosa Burned. And they're showing you video cam of what was happening about the first 12 hours of the burning up of our area with the use of lasers, microwaves, accelerants in the overhead chemtrailing, the pulsing of the smart meters, and, of course, on-ground arsonists and drones, everything I'm sure they were throwing at us, because we had multiple counties just absolutely erupt within those first few hours when all of this burn started. Also, I want to say that all departments, every single department you can type in, and this is what I demonstrate and illustrate in the YouTube, coastlines under attack, storm surge artificially created. It's more than just that. It's exposing the fact that all of our government agencies, our education agencies, the CDC, the World Health Organization, every branch of every military is following climate action plan resource reduction criteria. Remember, this is reduction of oxygen. This is really the reducing of the air we breathe, and a massive reorganization of everything that we've had in the past. Richie, when I come back on next time, I've got to go over the funding mechanisms of the climate action plans and the resilient plans, because as a builder, those are plans that every city has approved. They've all been approved in every town, everywhere, and now they have to be funded. And that's what they're doing now. So when they hit us with a weapons weather attack, you're going to see massive amounts of money coming in. Well, where is that money coming in from? We're going to tell you when we have an opportunity to come back on the show next time. But I do want to say this. We've researched the situation of Puerto Rico. And there's a document called Reimagine Puerto Rico, Resilient Puerto Rico Advisory Commission, and it's an energy sector report. I want to underscore the importance of picking up on the word advisory committee or advisory commission. These meetings are predetermined outcomes. This is a psychologically programmed policy that has already been established. with the illusion that public in that area has the opportunity to weigh in on the decisions. They do not. This is called oftentimes the Delphi technique. Anytime you hear the word consensus agreement, understand, I tried to get on a water committee here in Northern California, and they said, Deborah, you would have to agree to one thing, and that would be that you would have to agree with the majority on the conclusion of this discussion. You couldn't be a stand-alone in disagreement. That would not sway the reality of the policy.
Predetermined, Deborah. Predetermined, as you said. Advisory is illusory. It isn't advisory. It's been planned and drafted and written.
Yes, and consensus. Yeah. So these are global plans. These are outlined also in the World Bank as the methodology to trick all of us into thinking that we're weighing in with our local corrupt city leaders who have to be under different levels of mind control, or certainly are being paid off, or certainly are not understanding what the reduction of CO2 means. We are literally having to question who is and why they're putting forth these policies on our city and county and state levels in all departments everywhere, including the military. Because we have been taken. This is a global takedown, using these policies to shred our assets, pollute us into absolute extinction and in ill health. And now with the increased frequencies that are being put forth throughout the entire world, you have to wonder the planned genocide and the numbers by 2025.
It's incredible. And next time you come on, I want to talk about that, because those numbers are staggering. And some of my listeners will be giving me some stick. They will send me some rude emails to ask me, why didn't I challenge you on those numbers? We will dig down into those numbers next time, because they're amazing numbers in a 7-year period. I want to recommend to our listeners who are hearing Deborah for the first time. Now, a lot of our listeners have known about Deborah's work for years. It's relatively new to me, this sort of thing. It's important. StopTheCrime.net and primarywater.org. And if you go to YouTube and put StopTheCrime.net into the search term on YouTube, you'll find Deborah's channel, thousands and thousands of followers there, and an enormous tranche of material, videos, research, radio programs, documents. It's all there. Check it out. Deborah, it was an honour to meet you. Thanks for coming on and chatting with us today. And I look forward to doing it again in a month.
Thank you so much. And I look forward to coming back on too and linking arms so that we can share the reality that we all face and that we live in. There's power in support of knowledge.
An absolute pleasure, Deborah. Thanks again for today. That was Deborah Tavares, folks, live from California today. It's in the AM there. StopTheCrime.net, primarywater.org. I've already tweeted links to the videos that Deborah mentioned with the titles that she mentioned. They're all there. I've seen many of them myself in the last few days as I was building up to speaking with her today. What impresses me most about her is that constant linking to official documentation from town halls, from city councils, from government, from academia, but also from national newspapers, videos, audio clips from senators, from scientists. It's brilliant. It's all there, you know. No claims are made by Deborah without backing them up with a link to, well, this is how I came to understand this. It's brilliant. And sadly, in the independent media, it's all too rare. But Deborah Tavares, StopTheCrime.net, check it out. We'll take a quick break. Then I'll read a couple of comments, but I've got to wrap it up. We're running out of time very quickly. It's, Wednesday's program. 9 minutes to the top of the hour.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could could just change your life forever. Forever.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
The Richie Allen Show relies on your support. Go to richieallen.co.uk and set up a monthly donation today. Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show.
Yeah, 7.5 minutes to the top of the hour. Flew by that with Deborah Tavares. Again, good to have her on. StopTheCrime.net. And that's the YouTube reference as well. Stop the Crime, and you'll find it. To find out about Catherine Horton. Now remember, back in February, the original YouTube channel for this program was deleted along with over 1,000 videos. And those videos were individual interviews. So you can't find it on YouTube. But if you go to Podomatic, or if you just go to a search engine and put Richie Allen and Catherine Horton, you will hear my conversations with Catherine from about 18 months ago, 2 years ago. Catherine connected to me on Twitter. I initially thought that I was being wound up. I thought it was a wind-up, and I thought I was being set up to look like an idiot. And I was very dubious for a day or two about getting her on the programme. You know, you do sometimes get a little bit paranoid in terms, that's going to sound very ironic to those who think that programmes like this and people like me are paranoid anyway, and I'm not paranoid. As a rule, I'm not paranoid. But I did think in the beginning that I was being set up, and it was kind of like to make me look stupid. So I looked into Catherine. Oxford professor, being targeted by weapons, told me an absolutely staggering story about how she attended a court case in London a couple of years ago, and how from then on in she began to be stalked and harassed by the intelligence services. Sounded very wild and fanciful, but I absolutely believe her. I've had her on the programme a couple of times, although not now for quite a while. You can follow Catherine on Twitter by looking for stop007.org. That's stop007.org. Right, okay. Loads of tweets come in. Sorry for not getting to all of them, but I did pretty much put pretty much every question that you did put to me on Twitter. We got through most of them, and even if I didn't ask many questions, because Deborah was very good and she was very fluent, even if I didn't ask questions, she covered, by the way, say it for me, she covered pretty much all the topics anyway there. Coming up for 5 minutes to the top of the hour then. Just time, I suppose, to let you know about tomorrow's programme. My old friend Maria Heller joins me tomorrow, and Pippa King, another old friend, will be on to speak with me tomorrow as well. Nobody's done more to raise awareness about civil liberties issues around RFID tags, about facial recognition technology, about surveillance in general in this country. Amazing woman is Pippa King. She's back on this programme tomorrow as well. And I'm hoping to speak very early next week to the Irish presidential candidate Gemma O'Doherty, who's a journalist by trade and has been on this programme in the past. And I hope that we'll arrange that for this coming Monday as well. My old pal Mark Windows has been in touch. I don't know if Mark is listening. I am doing a programme early Friday afternoon. I might get Mark on because he's got some very interesting things going on himself. Mark's programme can be heard on Windows on the World. Just look for windowsontheworld.net and you can hear Mark's programme. It goes out on Sundays on Fab Radio here in Manchester, windowsontheworld.net. Might get Mark on for a conversation, as it were, on Friday afternoon. I'm going to leave you with some George Michael. And going to wish you wish you the very best for the rest of your Wednesday. Enjoy the rest of your day. Look after yourselves and one another, and I'll speak with you again tomorrow at 5 on your Richie Allen Show. Bye for now.